good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to welcome you all to the World Economic Forum on Africa and this press conference on the Africa Leadership University, where we're asking the question, how can Africa rethink education and foster the next generation of industry and society leaders? My name's Max Hall, I'll be the moderator. I think, first of all, I would like to go to Mr. Swaneker, if I may. Mr. Swaneker, maybe you could start by outlining the vision for the ALU and the importance of employment and skills.
Certainly, thank you. Well, Africa's sitting at a very important time in its future. We have a young and growing population which is projected to be the largest workforce in the world by 2050. It's going to be larger than what we have in China and India. And about 1 billion people are going to need jobs. And the challenge we see today with young people growing up is that they're not being prepared for these jobs. And existing universities are simply not doing a good enough job of enabling them also to create their own jobs. So today we find about 45% of people who graduate from universities in Africa today are not employed. In South Africa, you have about 800,000 openings for university graduates, and yet there are 600,000 unemployed people with university degrees. And what this means is that universities are not producing the skills that employers are looking for. And much of this young population that we have in Africa, which if nurtured properly could become a truly powerful force for developing our continent, could be our greatest resource, is therefore being left to waste. So what we set out to do with African Leadership University is to address this challenge, to really create a network of universities that will develop a new way of developing young people to prepare them for the 21st century with the skills that employers are looking for. And so we're taking a completely clean slate approach and saying, how do we reinvent a university to make it much more relevant for the 21st century? One of the things we're doing, for example, is we looked at the length of existing universities. In the US, it typically takes about 4 years to get a degree. And at an Ivy League university, you might pay $60,000 a year. So you spend $240,000 for this degree. But when you actually analyze the amount of time that students spend in school, they're on vacation for between 5 to 6 months of the year. So you pay $240,000 today for 2.3 years of education. And in Africa, we think that this is, we don't have time to be on holiday. So in our model, our students spend 8 months on campus and 4 months in employment every year. And they graduate after 3 years already with 1 year work experience. What we also do is during the 8 months when they're on campus, we ensure that they, from the get-go, are working on projects for organizations. For example, last month, they were working on a project for Uber, helping them figure out which is the next country in Africa that they should expand to. And then they're working on a project for IBM, helping them figure out where they should expand a certain healthcare technology solution they have, etc. So in all of this, what we're doing is we're preparing young people who are going to come out with the skills that employers are looking for. They know how to work in teams, they know how to think critically, they know how to solve problems, they know how to lead themselves. And these are the skills that will stay with them as the world changes. Finally, we're also ensuring that every single student who goes through the network of universities is developed to think entrepreneurially, because we want them to be able to create their own jobs and not to be looking for jobs from other people. And so the vision is eventually to build a network of 25 universities across Africa, each with 10,000 students. So at scale, we'll be educating 250,000 students at a time. And the first campus is open in Mauritius. We have 180 students. And the second campus we're looking to open here in Rwanda. So when this all comes to fruition over the next 50 years, we expect it will develop 3 million highly capable, innovative, entrepreneurial leaders who can transform Africa.
Thank you. Dr. Kabaruka, could I go to you to ask you how you plan to expand in Africa, but also maybe to talk about Rwanda as well?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you. First of all, let me say that I'm very privileged to join two of Africa's outstanding personalities in this initiative. That is Fred Swanik and Grasser. I think for me the biggest attraction was that these two people are leading an initiative which for me is transformational. And the reasons I think it's transformational are three. Number one, higher education in Africa is broken. As the president of the African Development Bank, I struggled about what to do. The elites send their kids abroad for training, and the rest of the African kids are trained in underfunded universities, overcrowded, and that is not sustainable. Number two, the Davos summit early in January was described as one which is looking at the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the fourth industrial revolution, which has already begun, is about skills, talent, not about capital, not about oil and gas. It's about what is it that our young people know. Science is already providing us with a whole complex new economy we have never seen in the history of mankind. From biotechnology, nanotechnology, genetics, robots, artificial intelligence, you mentioned it. And so as you prepare the African youngsters for the economy of tomorrow, we have to invest in them now differently. And what the African Leadership University is trying to do is provide those kind of skills in the shortest time possible. So that the fact that we have by 2030 this famous demographic dividend, which means you have less dependence in the economy and you have more people in the labor force. There'll be fewer people below 15, fewer people above 65, and more in the labor force, so that they're equipped for the economy of tomorrow based on talent. And I believe the model of LAU is exactly what we need to do. Now, it's a beginning. There'll be lessons to learn, but I do want to commend Fred and Grasa for this. And I'm happy as the chairman of the International Advisory Council to try to bring as many people in this coalition as possible.
My next question is to Mrs. Michel on as inaugural Chancellor of the Africa Leadership University. I want to ask you about your vision for the initiative, and maybe if you can also talk about why it's important to create opportunities for young people, and maybe also specifically opportunities for women in science and technology.
Thank you. Let me start by talking of the philosophy of the Africa Leadership Group. As the name says, it's about leadership. It's about developing different pools and crops of young Africans who in different fields of social activity will take the rightful place as young, well-qualified, dynamic, creative, you name it, but to lead the continent to what we all call Africa we want. The Africa Leadership Group started with the younger ones who would be completing the secondary higher education to be prepared to go to different universities in the world. But it sounded fit to go even bolder and look at how to prepare, as Fred was saying, in scale, young people who will be in different areas, able really to face the challenges of 21st century, take our continent to be part of the dynamics of development in the world, instead of, like it happens, us lagging behind. So that's leadership. But the second important concept, which is it's Pan-Africanism. In any of the institutions which the Africa Leadership is engaged in, it brings young people from all over the continent. It's to bring from different countries, from different backgrounds, and giving opportunities also to young people who may be coming from well-off families, but bringing those who simply coming from low-income families, they are never denied an opportunity to have a world-class institution with the African group, with the leadership group. So I think that's also very important, that it brings Africa and it builds in the old and the sustainable way of saying this continent belongs to all, and only when young people can live together, learn together, bond together, they will build the understanding of what it means to be African. The third point is also that African Leadership Group cares about gender, cares about equity. And in our institutions, we make sure that we have the right balance of young men and young women. And this is to say, we are not only talking of gender equality, we are building the conditions for men and women in future to see themselves as equal, to be equally equipped. And as I said at the beginning, it's not only technical knowledge, but also in leadership capacities. Having said this, I want to underscore what Fred was saying. The type of university which is being presented here is what we can call a creative disruption. It is a new concept which is being shaped by Africans for Africa to meet African challenges. We started by understanding the huge challenges we face, analyzing and understanding them, and say what kind of university we would need for us. So it is a breakaway from the tradition of learning from what other people have been doing, and to see how do we transplant it into African context. It's exactly the opposite. It's to say, Africa has this kind of challenges. Africa has to prepare its young generations to face these challenges. So what works for us? And then we go to global, and we borrow knowledge, expertise, institutional culture of others which can fit into our model, and we design a model. So it is from Africa to global, and we take what we feel it fits us from global, and we bring it to Africa.
Mrs. Michelle,
Yes.
can I just go to? I just wanted to ask about Rwanda too, because the Africa Leadership University is starting in Rwanda. We have Mr. Kamuhinda from the Rwanda Development Board, and I understand that you're working closely together. Could you outline some of the plans in Rwanda?
Thank you, Maxwell. It's an honor to be here today, and I'm very happy to be here at this time where ALU is officially announcing its campus in Rwanda. Our leadership right after the genocide has recognized that there was no shortcut to increase productivity. And so our leadership has crafted a growth path that is really centered on human capital development. And to that effect, Rwanda has established different centers of excellence, and those centers of excellence are mostly in areas of science and technology. I'm very happy today to see a center of excellence in the area of leadership and in an area of philosophy, because most of the time when people talk about the future of Africa, they say that we need a mindset shift or change. But in this debate, people are not able to always name the pressure point. What should we do to achieve that mindset shift? And as Mrs. Grassa Machel was saying earlier on, it is about a philosophy. And that mindset shift can only come by educating the future of Africa about leadership, about a self-assertion, and about dignity. And these are topics that are very dear to our president, and these are topics which we have found that they were very useful in our renaissance after the genocide. And if we can share with our fellow brothers in Africa this growth journey that we're embarking on as a continent, and discussing really the soft skills that are necessary to achieve that journey, we'll be very happy. And so the ALU for us, it's a dialogue, a constant dialogue about the Africa we want, bearing in mind all the past that has happened, and that we can't really disappoint the high expectations that are there, having such a youthful population. Thank you.
Can I just ask just a follow-up question? Is there, do you have a timeline for the development of the ALU in Rwanda?
Absolutely. ALU was approved by the cabinet, so this year it's starting to be implemented. There are different phases. Our friends didn't want to wait until a real physical presence is there, so we are going to use modern technologies to start already, and then as the campus, as the physical facilities are being built, we are going to shift to those premises. But it's starting already, and I must say also that our friends from ALU are no stranger to Rwanda. They've been associated with us for a long time, and we are happy to see that now they really have a house in their home, a place which they call, I think they are calling home for some time.
So if I can be a bit more specific, we're beginning with the first Pan-African business school, the School of Business, as part of the expansion plan into Rwanda, and that launches with our first set of students this September here in Rwanda. And the way it works is that we're doing in collaboration with Harvard Business School, McKinsey, and Wharton, leveraging online education from these institutions, but interspersed with every 4 months, these business leaders will come to Rwanda for a 1-week in-person experience, and that starts this September. And then the second phase is when we then will have some rented facilities, and then in the third phase when we're going to be building our campus. And I think this really ties in with the theme of this year's World Economic Forum, connecting Africa's resources through digital transformation. The fact that we'll be able to launch a business school under the aegis of this African Leadership University in such a short period of time by leveraging, curriculum that's already been developed by Harvard and Wharton and McKinsey, and saying, let's bring that together. Let's pick the best of the best from different segments, bring it together, and merge that with, leveraging technology and have a blended learning experience where students are learning online and in person through some of Africa's, top business leaders in a place like Rwanda. Is the kind of leapfrog thinking that we need in order to be able to really educate our people, because we've looked at the numbers, and in order for Africa to catch up to India's level of tertiary education, not even to try to get to the West, we would need to build about 135 universities the size of Harvard every single year for the next 15 years. And so traditional models would just not work. We need to think about radical new models that are complete departures from the past, like what we're doing with this business school, and like what we're also going to be doing with our undergraduate programs. So that just to give you a sense of, it's a very different type of university. And we're starting with our first batch of students this September here in Rwanda.
Thank you. I'd like to open up the floor to questions. Do we have a microphone? Would anyone like to ask any questions? question here. Could you give your name and the organisation you work for? Thank you.
My name is Terian Chebet. I work for Citizen TV in Kenya. We spoke with some of the members from your team about the concept of bringing other students from across the world to be part of the new African education system. And I'm just curious about that, because the norm is that we send our African students to international universities, but you're trying to do it the other way around. Perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about that.
Certainly. So our aspiration with the African Leadership University is not to build one of the best universities in Africa. We are so far behind the rest of the world that if we move at the same pace as the rest of the world, we'll never catch up. So we believe we need to find new models that are more effective and more relevant for the 21st century in order to actually catch up and exceed the rest of the world. And so so our aspiration is that this university will be one of the top universities in the world in the next 15 to 20 years. And the only way we will be able to see that we're achieving that kind of quality is when we're seeing students coming to attend ALU from USA, Europe, China, and India, the same way that African students clamor to get into Harvard and Yale and Princeton. So that's the aspiration. So up to 25% of the students we expect to come from outside of Africa, but saying that this is the new 21st century university, the university of the future, and it's been born in Africa because we don't have the legacy. And this is really the advantage of being, what I see happening right now is the fact that much like when the mobile phone came to Africa and we didn't have legacy and we're able to leapfrog, and most of the most exciting innovations in mobile technology came out of Africa, we can do the same with our university and attract students from all over the world.
Sorry, a question from you, madam. Just there. Can you give your name and organisation?
Sure.
and who you're asking the question to?
My name is Lade Araba from the Vizela Foundation based in Nigeria, and my question is directed to Fred Swanica as well. This is a great initiative, and I'm so excited by your focus on developing leadership across the continent. One of the things that I'd be interested to understand a bit better is, how are you going to ensure that the Francophone and Lusophone countries are not left out of this revolution?
That's a great question. So a couple of things. One is we are already integrating students from all around Africa into this thing, because we believe that for Africa to develop, we need to integrate our economies. Individually, our economies are too small. We do relatively, less than 15% of our trade is intra-African. And we talk about having a population of 1 billion and a GDP of 2 trillion. All of that is meaningless unless we can bring our countries together. So the fact that we are from inception attracting students from all over Africa, both Francophone and Anglophone, is going to allow us to drive that regional integration and to create a generation of leaders who have been educated together and will then trade with each other, will ensure that there's less conflict between countries and so forth. So Francophone Africa is absolutely part of it. We anticipate that about 30 to 40% of our students will come from Francophone countries. They're already coming from Francophone countries in our first campus in Mauritius. And we are, as we expand and build 25 campuses, we'll be putting some in Ivory Coast and Cameroon and Senegal and so forth. So it's absolutely part of the picture.
Mrs. Michelle, you had...
should
Sorry.
add also the Portuguese speaking.
Mozambique.
They are minority, but they are part of this. I think actually, as the model develops, we will have to develop the flexibility to look at the diversity. This time we are talking of language, diversity of our continent. You asked about Francophone, and I brought the Portuguese, but you could also bring the Arabic, because we have countries in the northern part of our continent who speak Arabic. So as the model develops, some adjustments in terms of integrating this diversity will have to be found. And that's what we're saying about the Pan-Africanism. The other thing I wanted to say is that, even this English-speaking, French-speaking, Portuguese-speaking, and now Arabic-speaking maybe, it is part of the legacy,
Old Africa.
the old Africa which we inherited. I would question You said you are from Nigeria, right? I would question, why are we concerned with the French speaking and Portuguese speaking and the Arabic speaking? We're not concerned with the teaching Swahili and the teaching Yoruba, for instance. That is the kind of changing of mindset we have to draw for ourselves in the long run. It's part of really bringing back the initiative and the things we do based on who we are and not we were made to be because of a certain period of our history. You know what I'm trying to say? So I take your point. I just wanted to say that this is not a cut and finish project. It's a project in a program in progress. And within this, these aspects of who are the Africans and how we claim our own identity will have definitely to be part of the leadership we want to develop for our future.
We have to finish it there. There will be, I see you have a question there. You can direct your question at the end, but we've run out of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.